a business plan. When I evaluate a business, when I'm working on a business turnaround, and I need to find out, why is my business failing? Or at least, why is it performing suboptimally? There are a couple of things I need to do, just regular processes that I have in place to help me turn around the business. So if we look at this as a human business, we need to do the same thing. And what I want to first do is a self-evaluation of the business. And that's the painful part. That's really hard, because if I really am concerned about the business rather than my own vanity and my own importance, I've got to take a hard look with brutal honesty. And when I find problems, they may be self-incriminating, because if I'm going to ask what's wrong with the business, and I am in management, I may need to ask what's wrong with me. And if I don't, I am sticking my head in the sand, and I'm not willing to improve the business. So let's begin this painful self-assessment of the human business. And it's not just to bash it over the head. In fact, we want to look at the good things. And we want to look at the negatives. What are the positives? What are the negatives? What do we want to keep doing because we don't want to stop doing the right things? And what do we need to change to make the business perform better? So when we look at the positives of the human business, we actually see quite a bit. There's a lot that's good out there, despite what we sometimes hear from presentations of Christianity. That, when I look around at the world, there's love, and there's beauty, and there's good. And we would be blind and stupid and foolish to deny that there's love and beauty and good. And in fact, that is perfectly in line with the traditional Christian view of the world. That when we look at Christianity and its understanding of the world, we go back to the account of the beginnings. Whether we accept them as allegorical or literal, we won't discuss that right now. But in Christian worldview, when God looks out over the world He has made, He says, "Behold, it is very good." There is love, and there is beauty, and there is good, and we must not deny that. Yes, there are problems. We'll get to those in a second, but there is good. In fact, the traditional Christian worldview is even more positive than that. The traditional Christian worldview does not believe in absolute evil. There are not two equally matched forces of good and evil who are striving for control of the universe. No, there isn't. We know who's in charge. There is the absolute good that is God. And then there is departure from that absolute good. And the more we depart from that absolute good, the more miserable we become. But there is no absolute evil in opposition to God. There is only absolute good and departure from that absolute good. A generally positive worldview. So there is a lot of good. It doesn't do any good. It doesn't help the business plan or the business model to go bashing the current generation. Some things never change. It reminds me of some humorous events from my childhood. I remember, I think it was our senior assembly in high school. I had a wonderful professor of engineering, Richard Gaudino, who I greatly appreciated. And he got up at the senior assembly and he read a letter from someone who was just bemoaning and complaining about the current generation, about how they were lazy and how they were disrespectful, and they were just so much worse than when we were growing up. And then he read the author of the letter. And if I recall correctly, it was Aristotle. It reminds me of a funny story my father tells me of his grandfather, my great-grandfather, lambasting my grandfather. So on that side of the family, they were New York harbor pilots for generations. And I can just picture this, I guess, crotchety old fellow taking his son, my grandfather, to task, saying, "In my days, the ships were made of wood, but the men were made of steel. Nowadays, the ships are made of steel, but the men are made of wood." I think, Give me a break. Does anything ever change? Do we always have to complain about the younger generation? I mean, this must be the 20s or the 30s, maybe the 40s. So let's stop doing that. That doesn't do anyone any good. There is good in the world. And the Christian business plan acknowledges that good. In fact, it says the world was made good. And there is no absolute evil. Only absolute good and departure from that absolute good. So there's a lot of good in the human business. But there are problems too. Just like it would be blind and stupid and foolish to not acknowledge the good that's in the world, it would be blind and stupid and foolish to not admit that there are some serious problems too. So what are these problems? As we listen to the evaluation of the human business in the Christian business plan, we find that there are two big problems with the human business. One is that we do have evil. I mean, it exists in the world. It exists communally in our societies, and it exists individually within each of us. I mean, most of us don't want war. We want love, and we want joy, and we want peace, and we want happiness. But we have war and crime and hatred and bigotry. We have this inconsistent mix of good and evil that makes up humanity. So that's problem number one. We have this inconsistent mix of good and evil. There is evil in the world. The second problem is a little more subtle and actually more important to our business plan. The problem number two is that the good we have is not good enough. The good we have is not good enough. Why? Because in all of our time on earth, our good has not succeeded in vanquishing our evil. Moreover, as we'll come to see, that the good we have is generally not sustainable. I mean, even with those we're close to, even with those we love most deeply, why is it that sometimes the ones we love the most are the ones we hurt the most? Our wives, our husbands, our children, our parents, our partners, our friends. Why, if we love them and they love us, do we hurt each other? Why? Because our good and our love is not good enough. As we'll come to see, it's generally selfish. And when the reinforcement that causes that good and that love fails, the love and the good fails. It's not sustainable for eternity. And there's the bottom line of the problem. The bottom line of the problem that the Christian business plan identifies in the human business is that we do not live an eternally sustainable lifestyle. We have an evil which would make eternity a living hell. And on top of that, the good that we have is not good enough because it is not sustainable. It is not fit for eternity. There's the problem that we need to fix. We do not live an eternally sustainable lifestyle.